the thing that's special about the Spamalot Diaries is when you were putting Spamalot together, and this is 2004, and you kept a diary of the entire process of putting it together. You then set the diary aside. And I remember going to your house when you and Tanya were packing it up to leave, to move to a different house. And in that process, you find the diary that you had forgotten.
I had completely forgotten I'd written it. I completely forgotten I'd kept it. And I read it and I gave it to actually Puddles, Puddles, his wife, to read. And she said, this is great. And then I gave it to my wife and she said, oh, this is fantastic, because what's interesting about a diary is you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know it's going to be that thing, and it's going to be successful. And so it's full of anxieties and arguments and rows, and it's the process.
Yes, this is what I love.
Saying about it, it's a process, not a miracle.
There's this misconception, and maybe it's appropriate. It should be this way. People love to think they're going to come in and they see something miraculous and that it just happened. And maybe that's the way an audience should look at it. But what's amazing is you read through this diary, because I think, well, oh yeah, Spamalot, massive hit, sold out forever. So of course, it just happened. You read this and you see how much work, anxiety, rewrites, and the creative wrestling between you and the director, Nichols, the famous Mike Nichols. And you have emails in here, you have notes back and forth, there's disagreements with other, or sometimes friction with other Pythons, and you're just like Job, you're just going ahead trying to make this thing happen.
I think that's what's interesting, because and I'd forgotten about it, I was just writing every few days what I was feeling.
Right.
And so it's this kind of a direct form of honesty. And I kept in the rows because I thought, no, people mustn't believe that the artistic process is just, we'll have a cup of tea and we'll make this thing.
Right.
There are conflicts. People need to be angry. We used to row in Python about what sort of chair it should be. That's not a funny chair. This is a funny chair.
Right.
No, this is a funny chair. So I think those are important. And so I kept in, particularly the row early on with Mike, because I thought it was very important for people to understand it. You must maintain your vision of something if you're a writer and you're doing a play, and the director doesn't have every say. Yeah. And fortunately for us, we'd been friends for 15 years.
You and Mike Nichols had met?
We'd just been pals. We'd been on holidays. We'd had the best of times. Been to the theatre, been to places all overseas, and we had never had a cross word. And then suddenly we're working together, and it's a completely different relationship, obviously.
Yes.
Now you're that person, he's that person. And I thought, well, I'm going to leave that because I think it's important to know that people establish who they are and then they can move forward.
I guess the part that is most fascinating to me is the statement that one of the themes that comes through in the Spamalot Diaries, and this applies not just to Spamalot, but to Python and I think just to comedy and all work, is that fighting, arguing, is an essential part of the process. Turmoil, anxiety is part of the process. And I cannot tell you how many, when someone tells me, oh, I love to write, I just love writing, I think you must be a terrible writer because I don't that's not my process. And my wife is a very good writer and she will tell me, oh, I hate it. It's miserable. And I'll say, right, exactly. Yes, that's what it is. That's, keep going. But that's what it is.
I think if you're content with what you're writing, you're not very good. And almost all great writers, I think Graham Greene said he'd written one or two sentences he was quite proud of.
Yeah.
Sentences.
Yeah.
I think all writing is like that because you're trying to capture flies in aspic. It's really a very difficult thing you're doing. You're putting down life in this code, 26-letter code.
Yeah.
How does that possibly even work?
Yeah.
And how some people have the gift of making you just read any sentence about anything, and you just pick up a book and you just read them all the way through because of the way they write. I find that fascinating.
I read a biography recently. There's a wonderful biography of Mike Nichols, and you find out, I mean, his childhood and his experience fleeing Nazi Germany, coming to America, kind of remaking himself. He famously had alopecia. He lost all of his hair, all that, having to wear a wig.
Not speaking English.
And he completely remade himself into the coolest, smartest, most urbane guy doing comedy, along with Elaine May. The sheer, not just talent, but will to, and the amount of struggle and pain you have to go through to remake yourself as Mike Nichols into that. And then I think you yourself, we've talked about it before in the previous podcast, and you've been very open about it. You have a very difficult childhood in many ways.
Yes. I think that's an advantage in art. I think, but nobody had a more difficult childhood as Mike. And for me, there's a new book about the making of Virginia Woolf, and which he's in. And I'm amazed it's his first film.
Yeah.
And he's standing up to Harry Warner and saying, no, it's going to be in black and white.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? He wanted to shoot it in black and white. He's got the two biggest stars on earth, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and he's a young punk who's never directed anything in his life, and he's telling the biggest man in show business to fuck off. And so the ball's on that guy. Absolutely incredible,
unbelievable. But it's based on some kind of his perception of what should be was really pure.
Right.
If Mike said something and you thought it wasn't quite right, you go, oh, it's not quite right. I never had any doubt that sometimes he would. He was a most fabulous friend of help. He didn't write, but he wrote with you in a sense. That he'd say, well, we need somebody to say this, and I say this, then and he would encourage it out of you so that you wrote better. Always with him.